A wealthy heiress invited the black veteran's son to a shooting contest as a joke, unaware he was a sharpshooting prodigy. "Come on, kid, show us how they shoot in the projects." Evelyn Harper's voice rang out, sharp and mocking, across the manicured lawn of her Texas estate. The crowd of elite guests, oil tycoons, local politicians, and their polished spouses, chuckled behind their wine glasses. Marcus Ranger Jackson, 18, stood quietly, his worn boots planted firmly on the grass, helping his mother, Lena, serve drinks at the annual Harper Foundation Gala. The event was supposedly for community outreach, but Evelyn's tone dripped with condescension, turning Marcus into the night's entertainment. Lena, a former Army medic who'd served 2 tours in Iraq, gripped her tray tightly, her face a mask of restraint. For 15 years, she'd cleaned Evelyn's sprawling mansion, enduring subtle jabs about her background, her skin, her single-parent life. Now, her son was the target. Evelyn, draped in a designer dress, gestured to the shooting range set up for the guests, a flashy display of wealth with custom rifles and clay targets. "I bet he's never held a real gun," she said, smirking at her friend, Senator Claire Rhodes. The crowd laughed louder, their eyes glinting with superiority. Marcus, however, stayed calm, his dark eyes scanning the range, the guests, the rifles. He'd learned early that silence could speak louder than words. At 18, he'd faced worse than rich folks' mockery, growing up in a rough Houston neighborhood, dodging stereotypes, and watching his mother sacrifice everything. Lena had taught him resilience, drawing on her military discipline to raise him alone on a maid's wages. "Lena, take a break," Evelyn said with fake kindness. "Watch your boy try his luck. It'll be a good lesson." The word stung, but Lena stood tall, her jaw tight. She'd known Evelyn since they were young, back when Evelyn was just a spoiled heiress, not yet the cruel socialite she'd become. Marcus caught his mother's eye, a silent promise passing between them. He'd grown up hearing stories of her Army days, how she'd saved lives under fire, her steady hands in chaos. Those stories had shaped him, pushed him to practice shooting at a local range with borrowed rifles, honing a skill he'd kept hidden. "All right, Mrs. Harper," Marcus said, his voice steady, almost too calm. The guests exchanged glances, some laughter fading. There was something in his posture, straight, deliberate, like a soldier before a mission. Evelyn sat back in her cushioned chair, sipping champagne, ready to watch her joke unfold. "This'll be fun," she said, waving at the range. "Those rifles cost more than your mom's yearly pay, kid. Hope you don't break one." Senator Rhodes chimed in, "Evelyn, isn't this a bit mean? He's just a kid." Evelyn waved her off. "Nonsense, Claire. It's a learning experience. He'll brag to his friends about shooting at a real estate." What Evelyn didn't know, what she'd learn in the worst way, was that Marcus had spent years mastering marksmanship. While other teens played video games, he'd studied ballistics, practiced breath control, and memorized windage charts on a beat-up library computer. At night, when Lena worked late, he'd train at a community range, turning borrowed rifles into extensions of himself. His mother's Army stories had fueled him, tales of precision under pressure. Marcus stepped toward the range, his movements precise, like he'd done this 1,000 times. The guests noticed, their chatter quieting. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, still smug. "Pick a rifle, kid. Let's see what you've got." Marcus chose a sleek bolt-action rifle, checking it with a practiced eye. The crowd murmured, surprised by his confidence. Lena watched, her heart pounding. She knew her son was good, better than good, but facing Evelyn's world was another battle. Marcus loaded the rifle, his hand steady, his focus absolute. The first clay target launched, and the crack of a shot echoed. The target shattered midair. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Evelyn's smile faltered, just for a second. Marcus didn't react, just reloaded, his face unreadable. He was ready to show them who he was, not with words, but with every perfect shot. The clay target exploded in the air, and the crowd's gasps turned to whispers. Marcus stood still, rifle in hand, as if the shot was nothing special. Evelyn Harper leaned forward, her champagne glass tilting slightly in her grip. "Lucky shot," she said, her voice loud enough to carry across the lawn. "Let's see if you can do it again, kid." Her smile was tight, like she was trying to convince herself it was a fluke. Marcus didn't answer. He loaded another round, his movements smooth, almost mechanical. The next target launched, spinning fast against the Texas sky. Crack. It shattered into dust. The guests went quiet, their wine glasses forgotten. Senator Claire Rhodes raised an eyebrow, her phone already out, recording discreetly. She sensed something big was happening. Lena stood at the edge of the crowd, her tray heavy in her hands. She knew that look on Marcus's face, focused, unshakable, the same look she'd had in Iraq when lives depended on her steady hands. She'd taught him that focus, drilling it into him through years of tough love and stories of survival. But this wasn't just about shooting. It was about proving something to people who'd never given them a chance. Evelyn clapped slowly, her smile forced. Not bad for a beginner. But let's make this interesting. She stood, her heels sinking into the grass, and pointed to a distant target, a small metal plate, barely visible, 300 yards away. Hit that, and I'll donate $2,000 to some charity for your neighborhood. Miss it, and well, you tried. The crowd murmured, some laughing nervously. They thought it was impossible. Marcus glanced at the target, then at his mother. Lena's eyes were steady, giving him a nod only he understood. He'd practiced shots like this at the community range, using borrowed rifles and ammo he'd saved up for. He'd studied wind speed, bullet drop, everything, alone, late at night, driven by a need to be more than what people like Evelyn expected. All right, Marcus said, his voice low but clear. He adjusted the rifle scope, his fingers quick and sure. The crowd watched, some leaning forward, others whispering bets. Evelyn crossed her arms, confident he'd fail. This is a real challenge, kid. Those rifles are precision tools, not toys from your block. Her words cut, but Marcus didn't flinch. He took a slow breath, just like Lena had taught him. Control your heart, control the shot. The rifle cracked, and the metal plate rang out, a sharp ping echoing across the estate. The crowd erupted in stunned applause. Evelyn's face froze, her eyes wide. Senator Rhodes's camera caught it all. Her shock, the crowd's reaction, Marcus's calm. That's impossible, Evelyn muttered, stepping closer to the range, as if checking for a trick. Marcus lowered the rifle, meeting her gaze. It's just practice, ma'am. His words were polite, but they carried an edge, like a soldier reporting a mission complete. The guests started whispering again, louder now. Who is this kid? One businessman asked. He's the Maid's son, another replied, disbelief in his tone. Lena's chest tightened. She'd spent years swallowing Evelyn's insults, cleaning her mansion while raising Marcus on $700 a month. She'd walked miles to work when their car broke down just to keep food on the table. Now, her son was turning their world upside down. Evelyn recovered, her laugh sharp. Fine, you got lucky twice. Let's raise the stakes. She snapped her fingers, and a staff member rolled out a moving target, a clay disc on a track, darting side to side. Hit that while it's moving, and I'll triple the donation, $6,000. But if you miss, she paused, smirking. You and your mom can go back to serving drinks. The crowd gasped. The cruelty in her tone was unmistakable. Lena's hand shook, but Marcus gave her a small smile, the kind he used when he was about to prove someone wrong. He'd been 9 when he first picked up a rifle at a community event, fascinated by its precision. While other kids played, he'd begged Lena to take him to the range, using her old army manuals to learn. He'd promised her one day he'd show the world what he could do. Now was that day. Marcus raised the rifle, tracking the moving disc. The crowd held its breath. Evelyn leaned in, her eyes gleaming with expectation of failure. The shot rang out, and the disc shattered. The crowd cheered, but Marcus didn't smile. He turned to Evelyn, his voice steady. You said $6,000 for charity, right? Evelyn's face went pale. She hadn't expected this. Neither had the guests, who were now staring at Marcus like he was something new, something dangerous. Senator Rhodes whispered to her husband, "This kid's no amateur." Lena felt a tear slip down her cheek, not from sadness, but pride. Marcus wasn't just shooting targets, he was dismantling every assumption in that room. But Evelyn wasn't done. She stepped forward, her voice cold. You think you're clever, don't you? Let's see how clever you are when it really counts. She gestured to a new setup, a series of 5 targets, each smaller than the last, at increasing distances. Hit all 5 in a row, under time. 30 seconds. Or you're done. The crowd went silent. This was no game anymore. It was a challenge meant to break him. Marcus looked at Lena, his eyes steady. She knew that look. It was the same one she'd had in the army, facing impossible odds. He was ready. The air on Evelyn Harper's Texas estate grew thick with tension as Marcus faced the 5-target challenge. The small metal plates gleamed in the fading sunlight, each one smaller and farther than the last, spread across 200 to 400 yards. 30 seconds to hit them all. The crowd stood frozen, their murmurs hushed. Evelyn's challenge wasn't just a test. It was a trap to humiliate Marcus in front of her elite guests. Lena clutched her tray, her knuckles pale. She'd seen Marcus practice under pressure, but this was different. These were Evelyn's rules, designed to make her son fail. Marcus adjusted his stance, rifle steady, his eyes locked on the first target. You sure about this, kid? Evelyn called out, her voice dripping with mockery. You can back out now. No shame in knowing your place. The words hit Lena like a punch, but Marcus didn't flinch. I'm good, ma'am, he said, his tone calm but firm, like a soldier answering a commanding officer. The crowd shifted, sensing something big. Senator Claire Rhodes kept her phone recording, her husband whispering, "This is unreal. He's too composed." The timer started, a loud beep cutting through the silence. Marcus fired. Ping. The first target rang out, struck dead center. The crowd gasped. He moved to the second, his hand steady, breath controlled. Ping. Another hit. Evelyn's smirk faded, her fingers tightening around her glass. He's just getting lucky, she muttered to a nearby oil tycoon, who didn't respond, his eyes glued to Marcus. The third shot rang out. Ping. The fourth. Ping. Each hit was clean, precise, like Marcus was born for this. Lena's heart raced, memories flooding back, teaching Marcus to stay calm, just like she had in Iraq, stitching wounds under gunfire. She told him, focus wins battles, not fear. He'd listened. The final target, a tiny plate at 400 yards, shimmered in the distance. 3 seconds left. The crowd held its breath. Marcus fired. Ping. The timer beeped, signaling the end. The crowd erupted in cheers, some clapping, others shouting in disbelief. Evelyn's face went white. No way, she whispered, stepping forward, her heels wobbling. Check the targets. Someone's cheating. The accusation hung heavy. A staff member ran to inspect, returning with a nod. All clean hits, ma'am. The guests buzzed, their respect for Marcus growing. Senator Rhodes leaned toward her husband. This kid's a phenomenon. But Evelyn wasn't done. She stormed to the range, her voice sharp. You think you're smart, huh? You and your mom planned this, didn't you? Some scheme to make me look bad. Marcus lowered the rifle, meeting her gaze. No scheme, ma'am. Just practice. Years of it. His words were simple, but they cut deep, exposing her desperation. Lena stepped forward, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. Mrs. Harper, my son earned every shot. You invited him to play your game. He just played it better. The crowd went quiet, the weight of her words sinking in. Evelyn's eyes flashed with anger. Don't you dare talk to me like that, Lena. You're just the help. The insult sparked murmurs among the guests. Senator Rhodes spoke up, her tone sharp. Evelyn, you're out of line. This boy just outshot everyone here, and you're throwing a tantrum. The crowd nodded, some whispering agreement. Evelyn's face reddened, but she forced a laugh. Fine. Let's see how he handles real pressure. She snapped her fingers, and the staff set up a new challenge. A rapid-fire sequence of 10 clay targets, launched in random directions, with only 20 seconds to hit them all. Hit every one, or you and your mom are out of here for good, Evelyn said, her voice cold. The crowd gasped at the threat. Lena's eyes widened, but Marcus gave her a small nod, his face unreadable. He'd faced worse odds, growing up with nothing, hearing, "You'll never make it," from teachers, neighbors, everyone. He'd promised Lena he'd prove them wrong, not with anger, but with skill. As the staff prepared the targets, a guest, a grizzled rancher named Tom Baxter, stepped forward. "I served in the Marines," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "Kid's got the makings of a sniper. That's no luck." His words shifted the mood. Guests started whispering about Marcus differently now, not as the Maid son, but as someone extraordinary. Evelyn ignored Baxter, her eyes locked on Marcus. "Ready to lose, kid?" she taunted. Marcus didn't answer. He checked the rifle, his hand steady, his mind racing through calculations, wind, distance, timing. Lena watched, her pride mixed with fear. She knew Marcus could do this, but Evelyn's cruelty was relentless. The targets launched, spinning wildly. Marcus fired, one shot after another, each crack splitting the air. The crowd counted silently. 1, 2, 3. By the seventh hit, Evelyn's confidence cracked. Her hands shook as she realized she'd underestimated him again. The final target spun high, almost out of sight. Marcus tracked it, his breath steady. The shot rang out, and the clay shattered. The crowd roared, but Marcus just lowered the rifle, turning to Evelyn. "That's 10, he said softly. Evelyn stood frozen, her world unraveling. The guests were no longer her audience, they were his. The crowd's cheers echoed across Evelyn Harper's Texas estate, but Marcus stood still, rifle lowered, his eyes fixed on Evelyn. Her threat to fire him and Lena hung heavy, a cruel twist that turned the shooting contest into a fight for their future. The guests, once laughing at Marcus, now watched in awe, their whispers praising his skill. Senator Claire Rhodes kept recording, her phone capturing every moment of Evelyn's unraveling. Lena stood at the crowd's edge, her heart pounding with pride and fear. She'd faced danger in Iraq, but this, watching her son battle Evelyn's malice, was a different kind of war. Marcus's calm voice broke the silence. 10 hits, Mrs. Harper. What's next? His tone was steady, but it carried a challenge, like a soldier daring the enemy to make a move. Evelyn's face twisted, her confidence gone. She forced a smile, but her voice shook. "You got lucky again, kid. But luck runs out." She turned to the crowd, raising her hands like a showman. "Let's see how he handles real stakes." A blindfolded shot. One target, 300 yards. "Hit it, and I'll donate $10,000 to your little community center. Miss it, and your mom's out of a job." The crowd gasped, the cruelty stunning them. Senator Rhodes lowered her phone, her face tight. "Evelyn, this is too far," she said sharply. "He's a kid, not your toy." Evelyn ignored her, her eyes locked on Marcus. "What do you say, kid? Scared yet?" Marcus didn't blink. He glanced at Lena, who gave a small nod, her eyes shining with trust. She'd told him stories of her army days, how she'd patched soldiers in the dark, relying on instinct. Marcus had trained for this, practicing blind shots at the range, using sound and memory when his eyes couldn't guide him. "I'll do it," he said, his voice low but firm. The crowd murmured, some in disbelief, others in admiration. Tom Baxter, the Marine veteran, stepped closer, his gruff voice cutting through. "Kid's got guts. I'd bet on him over any of you." His words shifted the mood, turning more guests against Evelyn. A staff member handed Marcus a black blindfold, and he tied it tight, his hand steady. Lena's breath caught. She remembered teaching Marcus to shoot, using her old army tricks. Listen for the wind, feel the rifle, trust your hands. She'd worked double shifts to buy him his first range pass, scraping by on $700 a month. Now, her sacrifices were on display. The target, a small metal plate, stood 300 yards away, glinting faintly. The crowd went silent as Marcus raised the rifle, blindfolded, his body still. Evelyn smirked, certain he'd fail. "Go on, kid. Show us what you're made of," she taunted. The shot cracked, sharp and final. A long pause followed, then a clear ping rang out. The crowd erupted, shouting, clapping, some jumping to their feet. The staff member ran to check, yelling back, "Direct hit." Evelyn stumbled back, her glass slipping from her hand, shattering on the grass. "That's not possible," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus pulled off the blindfold, his eyes meeting hers. It's just training, ma'am. Like my mom taught me. The crowd cheered louder, but Lena's eyes filled with tears. She'd raised him alone, facing eviction notices, empty fridges, and endless prejudice. Yet here he was, turning her lessons into triumph. Senator Rhodes stepped forward, her voice loud. Evelyn, you owe that community center $10,000. And an apology. The guests nodded, their respect now fully with Marcus. But Evelyn wasn't ready to lose. Her face hardened, and she pointed at Marcus. You think you're untouchable? Let's end this. She signaled the staff, who wheeled out a new setup, a single clay target launched at random, 400 yards out, with only one shot allowed. Hit it, or I fire your mom and blacklist her from every job in this county. The crowd went silent, the threat a gut punch. Lena's hands shook, but she stood tall, her army grit kicking in. Marcus looked at her, his face calm but fierce. He'd promised her at 12, after a landlord threatened to kick them out, that he'd make her proud. He'd studied shooting manuals by flashlight when their power was cut, driven by her stories of courage. I've got this, Mom, he said softly just for her. The guests watched, some whispering support, others stunned by Evelyn's cruelty. Tom Baxter clenched his fists, muttering, she's digging her own grave. Marcus raised the rifle, his focus absolute. The target launched, a tiny speck against the sky. The crowd held its breath, knowing this shot wasn't just about skill. It was about everything Marcus and Lena had fought for. Evelyn leaned forward, her eyes gleaming, sure she'd finally win. The clay target soared high above Evelyn Harper's Texas estate, a tiny speck against the darkening sky, 400 yards out. Marcus stood steady, rifle raised, his breath slow and controlled, just as Lena had taught him from her army days. The crowd held its breath, the weight of Evelyn's threat crushing the air. Missed this shot, and Lena would lose her job and any chance of work in the county. Senator Claire Rhodes gripped her phone, still recording, her face tense. Tom Baxter, the Marine veteran, clenched his jaw, muttering, come on, kid. Evelyn stood with her arms crossed, her eyes gleaming with certainty that Marcus would fail. One shot, kid, she called out, her voice sharp. Better make it count. Marcus didn't respond, his focus locked on the target's faint arc. Lena watched, her heart pounding. She remembered nights when Marcus was 10, sitting by candlelight, studying her old Army marksmanship manuals because they couldn't afford electricity. She'd come home from double shifts, exhausted, to find him practicing aim with a broomstick, mimicking her stories of precision under pressure. Now, that boy was facing a challenge meant to break him. The rifle cracked, the sound splitting the silence. The target shattered, its pieces raining down like confetti. The crowd roared, clapping and shouting, some standing in disbelief. Marcus lowered the rifle, his face calm, almost serene. That's the shot, Mrs. Harper, he said, his voice steady, cutting through the noise. Evelyn's smile vanished, her hands dropping to her sides. No, she whispered, stepping forward, her voice rising. That's not right. He cheated. Someone's helping him. The accusation stunned the crowd into silence. Senator Rhodes stepped forward, her voice firm. Evelyn, stop this. The kid hit every target fair and square. You're embarrassing yourself. The guests murmured agreement, their respect for Marcus now unshakable. But Evelyn's eyes flashed with fury. You don't get it, Claire. This nobody can't outdo me in my own house. Her words dripped with desperation, exposing her prejudice raw and ugly. Lena's voice cut through, clear and strong. He's not a nobody, Mrs. Harper. He's my son, and he's better than you'll ever be at this. The crowd gasped, shocked by Lena's defiance. For 15 years, she'd stayed quiet, cleaning Evelyn's mansion, swallowing her insults. But now, watching Marcus shine, she couldn't hold back. Evelyn turned on her, her face red. You're fired, Lena. Both of you, out of my house. The crowd froze, the cruelty too much even for them. Tom Baxter stepped up, his voice booming. You fire them, Evelyn, and you'll lose more than a maid. This kid's a hero, and you're making a fool of yourself. His words hit hard, and some guests nodded, their phones now out, recording the drama. Marcus stepped forward, his voice calm but piercing. "Mrs. Harper, you wanted a show. I gave you one. If you fire my mom, you're only hurting yourself." His words hung in the air, a quiet threat backed by his unshakable skill. Evelyn laughed, but it was shaky, hollow. "You think you're special? Fine. One last challenge." She pointed to the range, her voice trembling with rage. 3 targets, 500 yards, moving, in 10 seconds. Hit them all, or I'll make sure no one in this state hires your mom. The crowd gasped again, the stakes impossibly high. Senator Rhodes shook her head, muttering to her husband, "She's lost it." Lena's hands shook, but she met Marcus's eyes, giving him a nod. She told him once, after a rough day when bullies mocked him at school, "You're stronger than their words, Ranger. Show them." He'd taken her nickname for him, Ranger, from her Army days and made it his own, a reminder of her strength in him. Marcus nodded back, his face set. He'd trained for worse, nights at the range, shooting in the rain, pushing himself to honor Lena's sacrifices. The staff set up the targets, 3 metal plates darting on tracks, 500 yards out. The crowd watched, some whispering prayers, others filming. Evelyn stood tall, her confidence returning. Sure, this was too much for Marcus. "Ready to fail, kid?" she taunted. Marcus didn't answer. He raised the rifle, his body still, his mind racing through calculations, wind, speed, distance. Lena watched, her pride battling her fear. She'd raised him to face impossible odds, just like she had in war. The targets launched, moving fast, erratic. Marcus fired, 1 shot, then another, then a third. Each ping echoed, sharp and final. The crowd exploded, shouting, cheering, some hugging each other. Evelyn stumbled, her face pale, her world crumbling. Marcus lowered the rifle, turning to her. 3 hits. "We done." His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of victory. The guests stared, their admiration for Marcus now absolute. Evelyn's defeat was complete, but the real twist was coming, something no one saw coming. The crowd's cheers shook the Texas estate as Marcus's final shot rang true. The 3 metal plates at 500 yards struck perfectly in 10 seconds. Evelyn Harper stood frozen, her face a mask of shock, her hands trembling at her sides. The guests, once her loyal audience, now clapped for Marcus, their phones capturing every second of her defeat. Senator Claire Rhodes kept recording, whispering to her husband, "This is going viral." Lena stood tall, her eyes wet with pride, her Army grit shining through. She'd faced gunfire in Iraq, but watching Marcus dismantle Evelyn's cruelty felt like a bigger victory. Marcus lowered the rifle, his voice steady. "We done, Mrs. Harper?" The question was simple, but it cut like a blade, exposing her failure. Evelyn's lips twitched, searching for control. "You think you've won," she snapped, her voice cracking. "You're still nobody. I'll make sure everyone knows it." The crowd gasped, her venom stunning them. Tom Baxter, the Marine veteran, stepped forward, his voice rough. "Lady, you're the one looking small right now. This kid's a damn sniper." His words sparked murmurs of agreement, the guests' loyalty shifting. Evelyn's eyes darted, sensing the tide turning. "You don't get it," she shouted, pointing at Marcus. "He's playing you all. He's not some prodigy, he's a fraud." The accusation hit like a bomb. A new twist dropped. Evelyn pulled out her phone, waving it like evidence. "I had my staff check him out. He's been sneaking into my private range at night, using my equipment. That's how he's so good." The crowd buzzed, some confused, Haley others skeptical. Marcus's face stayed calm, but Lena's heart sank. She knew the truth. Marcus had never touched Evelyn's range. He'd trained at a rundown community center, using borrowed rifles, scraping by on grit and her old Army manuals. "That's a lie," Marcus said, his voice firm, eyes locked on Evelyn. "I trained at the community range, not yours. You can check the logs." Lena stepped forward, her voice shaking but strong. "My son worked for every shot. You can't take that from him, Evelyn." The crowd leaned in, torn between Evelyn's claim and Marcus's calm denial. Senator Rhodes raised her voice. "Evelyn, you're reaching. Prove it or let it go." Evelyn's face reddened, her plan backfiring. She scrolled her phone, pretending to check something, but her silence betrayed her. The guests whispered, some shaking their heads. Tom Baxter crossed his arms. Sounds like you're scared, Harper. Kid beat you fair, and you're making stuff up. The crowd nodded, their trust in Evelyn crumbling. But Evelyn wasn't finished. Her eyes gleamed with a new idea, a desperate twist. Fine, she said, her voice cold. One final test. A live duel. You versus my security chief, ex-Navy SEAL, right now. Winner takes all. Your mom keeps her job, and I'll fund a new wing for your community center. Lose, and you both leave, no questions asked. The crowd gasped, the stakes higher than ever. Lena's breath caught. She knew Marcus was good, but a duel against a SEAL was brutal. Marcus met her eyes, his nod steady, like when he was a boy promising to make her proud after a rough day. He'd grown up hearing her stories of courage, how she'd saved lives under fire. Those stories had pushed him to master shooting, to turn pain into precision. I'm in, Marcus said, his voice quiet but ironclad. The crowd murmured, some cheering, others worried. Senator Rhodes shook her head, muttering, this is insane. Evelyn signaled her security chief, a tall man named Holt, who stepped forward, his face hard but respectful. No hard feelings, kid, Holt said, gripping his rifle. Just doing my job. Marcus nodded, his eyes sharp. Same. The staff set up the duel, 2 moving targets, 600 yards, first to hit both wins. The crowd spread out, phones raised, the tension electric. Lena's hands shook, memories flooding back, nights when Marcus practiced by flashlight, promising to rise above their struggles. She taught him to stay calm, just like she had in war. Now, he was facing a trained killer. Evelyn smirked, sure Holt would crush Marcus. Ready to lose everything, kid? She taunted. Marcus didn't answer, his focus on the range. Holt took his position, his movements precise, professional. The targets launched, darting fast. Marcus and Holt raised their rifles, the crowd silent, hearts pounding. The first shots fired, cracks echoing together. One target shattered. Then another. The crowd roared, but no one could tell who'd won, until the staff ran to check. The result would change everything. The crowd held its breath as the staff checked the targets, the air thick with anticipation. Marcus and Holt, the ex-Navy SEAL, stood side by side, rifles lowered, their faces unreadable. Evelyn Harper's smirk faltered, her eyes darting between the range and the guests, who were now openly rooting for Marcus. Lena gripped her hands, her army instinct screaming to stay calm, but her heart raced for her son. She'd taught him to face fear head-on, like she had in Iraq, but this duel was a gamble against a trained warrior. The staff returned, faces stunned. Both targets hit, one shouted. But Marcus hit first, by a fraction. The crowd erupted, cheering wildly, some chanting Ranger. Evelyn's jaw dropped, her face pale. No, she yelled, storming forward. Check again. That kid can't beat a SEAL. Holt raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. It's clean, ma'am. He won fair. The crowd roared louder, their phones capturing Evelyn's meltdown. Marcus turned to Lena, his eyes soft. Told you, Mom. We're enough. His words hit her hard, pulling up memories of late nights when she'd come home from cleaning, finding Marcus practicing aim with a stick, promising to make her proud. Senator Claire Rhodes stepped up, her voice sharp. Evelyn, you're done. This boy's a hero, and you're a disgrace. The guests nodded, their whispers turning to open criticism. Evelyn's eyes flashed with panic. You're all against me, she shouted, then pointed at Marcus. This isn't over. I'll ruin you both. The crowd gasped at the threat, but then came a twist. Tom Baxter, the Marine veteran, pulled out his phone, showing a grainy video. I got footage of the kid training at the community range, not yours, Harper. You lied about him stealing. The crowd buzzed, phones lighting up as guests shared the video. Evelyn's lie was exposed, her cruelty laid bare. Lena's voice broke through, trembling but fierce. You've bullied us for years, Evelyn. My son just showed the world who you are. Marcus nodded, stepping closer. You wanted a show, ma'am. You got one. His calm words cut deeper than any insult. Evelyn stumbled back, her empire crumbling. Senator Rhodes raised her phone. "This is live, Evelyn. 2 million views already." The crowd cheered, but Evelyn's face twisted with a final, desperate twist. "You'll regret this, kid," she hissed, then turned to Holt. "Tell them he cheated. Do it." Holt shook his head, his voice low. "I don't lie for anyone, ma'am. Kid's the real deal." The betrayal stunned Evelyn, leaving her alone, exposed, as the crowd turned away, their respect now Marcus's. Evelyn Harper stood alone on her Texas estate, the crowd's cheers for Marcus drowning out her protests. Her lies were exposed, her security chief Holt had turned against her, and Senator Claire Rhodes's video was now viral, with millions watching her downfall. Marcus stood tall, rifle at his side, his eyes on Lena, who smiled through tears. She'd raised him on $700 a month, teaching him grit from her Army days. Now, he'd turned her lessons into triumph. The crowd chanted Ranger as Tom Baxter clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "You're one of us, kid," he said, his Marine pride clear. Evelyn's voice cracked. "This isn't over." But no one listened. Senator Rhodes stepped forward, her voice loud. "Marcus, I'm funding a scholarship for you, and a shooting program for kids like you." The crowd cheered, phones flashing. Lena's heart swelled. She'd faced war, but this was her victory. Marcus spoke, his voice steady. "Thank you, ma'am. But this is for my mom. She's the real hero." The crowd roared, moved by his humility. Evelyn's empire crumbled. Guests left, whispering about her cruelty. Days later, her charity gala was canceled, her reputation ruined. Marcus and Lena walked away, heads high, her job secure. The moral was clear. True strength comes from heart and skill, not wealth or power. Marcus's shots didn't just hit targets, they shattered prejudice, proving anyone can rise with hard work and courage.